Before I begin, let me share with you that this sermon is less linear than many of my messages are. I acknowledge that, and I also draw from my own personal opinions. The other is that if you are not in the group that considers yourself to be aging, you will be with any luck. So listen a little bit to what this is like. One of my uncles was known for saying something every time someone mentioned at any family reunion the aches and pains of growing older. "It's better than the alternative," he said. Believe me, everyone in our family knows that line. He's right, you know. Death is still an unanswered question, even for those of us who might believe in an afterlife. Better to live than to encounter death too soon and discover for oneself the truth in one's theology. Equally difficult, though, is the art of growing old well. Yes, it is an art. It is an art that requires creativity and purpose to live with diminished resources and still retain the spice that gives life meaning and connects one with the force that grounds one's being. In a sense, growing older, moving into middle age and beyond, is a time of loss. You lose your energy, your looks, your position, and your delusions of grandeur. At a certain point in life, the funerals begin to pile up. At some point, those who grow older lose their parents and friends, and even sometimes life partners. The sense of loss can be overwhelming, challenging one to crawl out of the hole of despair. Sometimes the losses can be stacked up, with each loss reminding one of all the others. Sometimes we return to the grief of one great loss every time we experience a small loss, cycling us through the emotions that we dealt with earlier. This might seem presumptuous. You might be thinking, how dare my minister who's only 60 years old speak to me of aging? In my time as a Unitarian Universalist minister, I have worked with or been a member of 17 congregations. In all of those 17 congregations, most of the people I encountered regularly were over the age of 60 years. In fact, when I began in ministry, the older congregants were World War II veterans of that generation. And now as I look upon some of you, I realize that you are veterans of the Vietnam War, or have lived through that era. We might debate that 60 is the new 50, or something like that, but I have come to realize that aging is still aging, regardless of health. Secondly, I'm also beginning to feel the impact of growing older. On cold, damp days, and sometimes on hot, damp days, my back aches. And lately, in the past 2 years, my fingers have become more prone to sudden pains and swelling, and I know what that means. I found my first silver hair when I was 27 years old. Now they are so plentiful I cannot count them. Additionally, at my age and in my vocation, I have attended more funerals of people I knew than many people 20 years older than myself. I have ministered to more than 1,000 adults in various congregations. At this point, I have known hundreds of people who are more than 70 years old in those congregations. My observations from this experience is that age does not need to be a period of loss or of grief. Growing older can also be a time of creativity and purpose. Any period of life has the potential to be one of adventure if it is approached as such. Florida Scott Maxwell writes, "I want to tell people fearing age that it is a time of discovery. If they say, of what? I can only answer, we must find out for ourselves, otherwise it won't be discovery. It seems that Florida Scott Maxwell understands something important. One can live with loss, and life becomes a point of recollection of the past, a time when one lives in memory of friends and family who are no more. As we grow older, those memories do have the potential to remind us of joyful days as well. However that may be, it is important that one create a new reality as one grows older, connecting the past to a present and future. It becomes all the more important that one undertakes some action that keeps one involved in living meaningfully. This means finding a new calling or even several new callings, life activities that involve passion and connection. I discovered such a way of growing older years ago. I guess it was about nearly 27 years ago. This happens to you when you grow older. I participated in the funeral of a 94-year-old woman in a small New England town. I served the church there. As I looked out over the crowded sanctuary that morning, I noticed something unusual. First, the sanctuary was full. There was hardly any sitting room. Usually when someone dies at her age, the memorial service is attended by a fairly small number of people, most of whom are probably related to that person. Also, more than a few teenagers were present. It is not totally unusual for teenagers to be present at a funeral, but it is unusual for so many teenagers to be present at the funeral of someone who died at 94. They were neither her grandchildren nor her great-grandchildren. They were not there as the children of friends or neighbors. Rather, they were at her funeral because they were her friends. Can you imagine that? She was 94 years old, and she had friends who were as young as 15 years of age. She was not someone who was like a cool granny riding down a motorcycle through town, 94 and decked in black leather. She was not someone who was into rock and roll. She loved classical music. She attracted teenagers to her through her love of art and listening. She was an amateur artist, and she invited young people to visit her and paint with her in the afternoons. Generations of young people had visited her home in that small town, taken brush to canvas, talking with her. Afterward, they sat and had Coca-Cola with her as she asked them about their lives. She had shared her passion with others, and her friendships crossed the usual boundaries of age. It seemed to me at that moment that this elderly woman had beaten growing old. Yes, she was fortunate enough to be healthy and active until the last 9 months of her long life. That in itself was extraordinary. But in a sense, she never grew old. Age did not slow her down compared to the rest of us. Most importantly, though, she continued to widen her circle of friends, taking an interest in other people and pursuing her art until the end. At the end of the memorial service, I realized that I envied her ability to make friends and to share her passion so effortlessly. Certainly, she lived the good life. The learning from her experience was that growing old was in part a mindset. If one is open to new people and new interests and passions, then maybe one will be able to cope with the weight of life experience and will live toward the future while not being held down too much by the past. This is an orientation of the spirit, not to yield to loss, but to persist in that which gives meaning to one's life. neither to yield completely to physical weakness, nor to yield to entropy with the world. That is the art of growing older. This art of growing older might take the form of continuing passions or finding new ones. Just as long as you have breath, you can contribute to the continuing struggle in which all human beings are involved. Even if you are ill and unable to walk, you might still be able to lift a pen, letting your words speak to the need for justice. Just as long as you can speak, you will have the ability to share that which you know. As age comes to us, we can permit our losses to hamper us, or we can continue to work for the benefit of all. For some of us, the ability to share what we love with others is a challenge. Yet it is still part of the journey, and growing older does not mean surrendering. It means looking forward. 22 years ago, I served a church in New Hampshire. One of my congregants was Claude Bunyard. He was an elderly English gentleman, a veteran of World War II who had spent time in German prisoner of war camps. I had discreetly asked some members of the congregation to give me names of people whom I should visit. They gave me Claude's. I tried to visit him, but the problem was, at age 90, he was never home. He traveled frequently to Australia, sometimes to England, and sometimes to New Zealand. When he was in the United States, he was busy with designing furniture. He had designed chairs for Crate and Barrel. He was a furniture designer. It was one of his life's passions. And working in his garden was also he was after all English. Let's face it, they love their gardens. On one of the visits I did make to his home, he told me that he was looking forward to seeing his garden 10 years from that date. Now remember, at the time, he was more than 90 years old. It seems that is a common trait of those who grow old well. They have the ability, even as their abilities diminish, still to care about the world in some way. Those who age well are forward-looking, thinking about how the nation, the community, the church will look in years in the future. They're open to making new acquaintance, often it's outside of their generational cohort. They think about relationships, care about something. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, sorry for the sexist title, but that's the way things were when it was written, psychiatrist Viktor Frankl describes his experience as a prisoner in Nazi concentration camps during the Second World War. He observed that some people who lived beyond what he, as a physician, knew it was impossible to endure. Frankl observed that those who survived circumstances that should have killed them had some greater meaning in their life, some great purpose or great vision that enabled them to persevere when they should have died. He came to the realization that meaning in a person's life sometimes is greater than the force of death. Viktor Frankl believed that the finding of meaning was stronger than entropy. He wrote, "Everyone has his own specific vocation or mission in life. Everyone must carry out a concrete assignment that demands a fulfillment. Therein he cannot be replaced, nor can his life be repeated. Thus, everyone's task is unique, as is his specific opportunity to implement it." That is a powerful reality. If we can find some great cause that moves our spirits, then we might endure the vicissitudes of aging. We can live longer, more fruitful lives if we can find some passion, some creative, engaging purpose that brings us to share our life with others and gives us meaning. This observation is not only for those who are aged, but also for us, also is important for those who are younger as well. What do you love? Do you love art? Do you love your church? Do you love your town and your state? Do you love your family above all? The power of love can call you to some great meaning, and as you grow older, it can still be a force in your life, strengthening and moving us forward. Frankl observed that the search for meaning and connection with each other and with the world is based upon continuing to love and to find beauty. Yes, life can be dark and painful. Yes, we face many struggles as we age. Viktor Frankl believed that those who sought beauty in the world would find it. He believed that one's attitude about the world determined what one would experience. If one continually looks for the beautiful, then it appears even when one is in misery. Frankl described an experience that he and other men in the concentration camp had one evening. He writes, "One evening when we were already resting on the floor of our hut, dead tired, soup bowls in hand, a fellow prisoner rushed in and asked us to run out to the assembly grounds and see the wonderful sunset. Standing outside, we saw sinister clouds glowing in the west, and the whole sky alive with clouds of ever-changing shapes and colors, from steel blue to blood red. The desolate gray mud huts provided a sharp contrast, while the puddles on the muddy ground reflecting the glowing sky. Then, after minutes of moving silence, one prisoner said to another, 'How beautiful the world can be.'" Aging is not like being in a concentration camp. It is a time when one needs to find that which gives beauty and meaning, that which raises life to purpose, and it is an attitude. Now, I will acknowledge that with aging comes physical frailty. That doesn't mean an end. As long as one can speak, then one can still be invested in the future. I have known Unitarian Universalists who are bedridden but were well known by the office staff of their state or local politicians. They would read something and communicate with their politicians. And why not? They were still citizens and had the obligation to take part in our process. They needed to give their senator a piece of their mind. Beyond this action, growing older can also be a time of reflection and integration. The events of a lifetime come together and wisdom is gained. Some people in their elderly years, especially some Unitarian Universalists, are able to reflect on their spiritual past beyond rebellion of youth or the knowledge of middle age, to revisit their spirituality of their childhood without the fear of being wronged or judged, with the knowledge that they can take from it what was true and joyful without letting the past weigh them down. Finally, growing older is an adventure, if one accepts it as such. Not the postlude, but an entirely new chapter in life, if one accepts it. The Victorian poet, Tennyson, understood this and illustrated this theme in his poem, Odysseus. In the poem, the Greek king Odysseus, for whom the Odyssey is named, abdicates his throne to his son and the next generation, knowing that they will need to find their own way and find their own adventure and also their own solutions. Odysseus gathers the aging mariners, the ones who have survived thus far, at the port for another adventure. They are literally leaving the nation to the next generation. He stands before his men at the ship, encouraging them that though they are decades older, they must do what they love and cast down in their triremes, their boats, to confront gods and monsters, to leave their safe place to right wrongs. They know that this journey might very well mean their deaths, but they are ready to face whatever the fates will present them. to be about the adventure that stirs their souls. They are unwilling to resign themselves to a docile old age, but are confirmed to live to their fullest, even though they are much weaker than they once were. Odysseus stands before the boat and tells them, "There lies the port. The vessel puffs her sail. There gloom the dark, broad seas. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine and opposed free hearts, free foreheads. You and I are old. Old age hath yet his honor and his toil. Death closes all, but something ere the end, some work of noble note, may yet be done. Not unbecoming men that strove with gods." The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes, the slow moon climbs, the deep moans round with many voices. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off and sitting well in order smite the sounding furrows, for my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the bass of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be that we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. May that spirit of adventure, that Holy Spirit, be with us as we grow older, now and evermore. Amen.